Hi, my name is Derek Sebastian. I'm with Bayer Range and Pasture, and I'm going to give you a quick rundown on Rejuvra application recommendations. This is very critical to the effectiveness of this tool, so we'll talk about application equipment, application timing, tank mixes, as well as mixing order. So what does a tool like Rejuvra provide us now for rangeland weed management? And what it provides is motivation that we can finally get long-term management of weeds like cheatgrass. We don't have to continue to lose the battle on these invasive annual grasses because the seed bank is something we need to target, which is 3 to 5 years in the soil. And what Rejuvra does, and this photo shows that 3 years after treatment, we can get multiple years control of invasive annual grasses like cheatgrass, medusa head, and bentonata with one application, where we don't get reinfesting of the site via the soil seed bank like you see in the untreated and the plateau treatment here. And in order to get this longevity and control, application is very, very important, and we'll talk about those details. When you look at Rejuvra in June of 2020, EPA actually approved this new rangeland label for Rejuvra that allows livestock grazing with a 0-day no restrictions on grazing. So that means that we now have this tool that can be used by land managers in the Western US, and there is a no restriction on livestock grazing. In terms of use rates, what you're going to want to pay attention to here is the difference between areas that are grazed and non-grazed. Where you see this blue box, if area is grazed by livestock, the maximum use rate we can use with one application is 5 ounces of product per acre. If you're non-grazed site, you can go up to 7 ounces of product per acre. So your range would be 5 to 7 ounces on non-grazed. If it's a grazed site, you're only going to want to go up to 5 ounces of product per acre. When you look at the difference between Rejuvra and our Esplanade 200 SC product, you'll find a few differences here. Rejuvra is our new product for anything open space, natural areas, rangeland, CRP. You can see the use sites below that. Any rangeland, like we talked about, wildlife areas, that would be our Rejuvra tool. Esplanade is for industrial vegetation only. So those are sites such as railroads, roadsides, hardscapes, airports, government installations, parking lots. So anything that's industrial or right away is where you want to use Esplanade. Rejuvra also has a full grazing label like we talked about, where Esplanade will also have a full grazing label. So both products will carry that. And there is a difference between aerial and ground application. Esplanade for right-of-way industrial bare ground can only be applied via ground, where Rejuvra, we have aerial plus ground applications that are available. When you look at this new tool, Rejuvra, it's something that's being developed, and it's been developed over the past few years. And what we know is that this product consistently and effectively controls all the major invasive annual grasses. There's been now over 130 replicated field trials with 18 universities, a large number of faculty and graduate students, and a lot of agencies, local governments, and NGO cooperators. So this is a tool that's been used widely in the West, and something when you look at soils and moistures and all the different soils and moistures in the West, this tool has provided consistency that we haven't been able to achieve with other tools for invasive annual grass management. Like I mentioned, this product is very consistent. It controls all the major invasive annual grasses that you see in this table. All the bromus species, cheatgrass, cheat, Japanese brome, red brome. We have medusa head, ventonata. Feral rye takes multiple applications to get the seed bank depletion. We also get jointed goat grass and bulbous bluegrass, the bulblets of those plants. So when you look at a tool that provides control of all the major invasive annual grasses, this is a great opportunity for rangeland managers. How does this product work? It's a pre-germination herbicide that inhibits the root growth of emerging seedlings. So it's pre-germination. And what it does is it stays in that topsoil profile like you see in that image on the bottom left-hand corner. The herbicide stays in the topsoil, and you have your perennial grasses, forbs, and shrubs that have roots below that herbicide zone. And that's where, like that photo shows on the right, we can selectively take out and control the invasive grass while promoting the reestablishment of those perennials because that herbicide is in that topsoil profile. This next video is going to give you a good rundown on what that looks like. It shows you that in a non-treated area on the left, you see those cheatgrass seedlings germinating and beginning to grow. You see those roots that are growing in the untreated. And when you look at the Rejuvra treatment, what it's doing is it controls those seedlings as they begin to emerge and they aren't able to survive. And that's what this video is showing you pretty clearly is Rejuvra is that root inhibiting herbicide, and we're getting excellent control of species like cheatgrass. When you look at application timings in terms of month of the year or growth stage, this gives you both of those options to look at. We'll start on the left-hand side. If you're going out pre-emergent, so that means you don't see that weed, you don't expect to see that germination of that weed for at least 1 to 2 months. And what we see is that for pre-emergence, we can go with 5 to 7 ounces of Rejuvra by itself, and that is approximately in that June, July, early August timeframe. As soon as we start to get what we call the white phase, where we get some roots that are developing below ground, or you start to see those seedlings above ground, Rejuvra isn't going to control anything that's already germinated. And that's where we need to tank mix another tool like Plateau or Rimsulfuron. And if you're in that August through October timeframe, that's a great time to mix that Rejuvra plus that post-emergent option like Plateau to give you that initial control. And then Rejuvra will give you that longevity and control by having that in the tank mix. The final option is this post-emergence timing when the natives are dormant. When your natives are completely browned out, you can add something like Roundup at a low rate, 6 to 12 ounces per acre. And what that does is it's going to control those larger invasive grass seedlings that are above the thatch layer. Maybe they've started to tiller, but we're in the dormant season, so the glyphosate should not impact those perennial grasses, forbs, and shrubs that you have at the site. And then we have Rejuvra tank mix there for the longevity. So depending on the time of year and what you would like to tank mix or not tank mix, there's quite a few options in terms of when you can apply a product like Rejuvra or combination products. Mixing order is actually very important when it comes to suspension concentrate tools like Rejuvra. And what you want to do is make sure you shake the jug very well before you do any of these next steps. But what you want to do is add half water. You're going to add Rejuvra first to the tank before any other liquid. You'll then add your other liquids such as Plateau or Roundup, add NIS last, and then add the remaining water, and then make sure to agitate that really well. It's just very important to note that Rejuvra always goes in the tank as the first liquid in your tank. For surfactants, you'll want to use something like NIS only for post-emergent applications. You don't need a surfactant for pre-emergence applications. And if you're, and you can also add a moisture stabilizing adjuvant if you're in a hot, low humidity area so that those droplets aren't going to evaporate. So these are some options for both aerial and ground. When you look at labeled application equipment, we're labeled for all rangeland type equipment. We have tractors, we can go ATV, UTV, side-by-sides, we can use fixed wing, or we can use helicopter. And there are some specifications around different parameters for these aerial applications and ground application. In terms of key aerial recommendations, it's something to think about is that uniformity and uniform coverage is very critical because we're trying to control thousands and not millions of seeds on the soil surface. So we want to make sure we're laying a uniform blanket of Rejuvra on the soil surface. To do that, we're going to need a minimum 5 gallons of water per acre, and we want to target a medium-sized droplet. We want more droplets that are smaller in size so we can get better coverage on that soil surface. And if you're doing fixed wing or helicopter, we want our distance of our outermost nozzles on the boom that they must not exceed 75% the length of the wingspan or the rotor. That's just going to give you the best coverage overall, and it's going to minimize the amount of skips you have between treatments, which is very important. And I can't stress this enough. You get one chance at the time of application of achieving uniform coverage and maximizing the long-term success of your treatment. What we're trying to do is get this Rejuvra tool out on the soil so it can provide the longest duration of control of these invasive annual grasses and promote our perennial species. And that's really what we're after with these treatments. And it's an investment, and we want you guys to make sure that you're putting it out the way that it should be put out with the correct volumes, droplet size, so you're going to have the largest amount of success that you can have. When you look at key ground applications, there's not a huge difference in what we just talked about with aerial. Uniform coverage is critical. We are going to want to bump that GPA up to about 20 GPA minimum. We're going to shoot for that medium-sized droplet. We want those droplets and coverage to be very good. We've also noticed that flat fan nozzles with a fixed boom spray system gives you a little bit better coverage than boomless systems, where you can get those large droplets on the tail ends of a boomless system and not as great a coverage. So you want to make sure that you are getting the best coverage as possible, whether you're doing a fixed boom or a boomless nozzle setup. And once again, you get one chance at the time of application to achieve this uniform coverage and maximizing your success. And that's really what we're trying to provide and equip you with. Because if we're able to do that, that's when these just amazing benefits, come to reality. Where Rejuvra, we've seen time and time again, we can increase pollinator and wildlife habitat with these treatments. We're able to use these for fire breaks and decreasing wildfire risk. And that's a huge thing now here in the Western US. And this shows you, this is from a wildfire this last 2020 season where we didn't have treatment and we had a lot of cheatgrass. You can see how hot that area burned. But when we're able to get a treatment out there, a uniform treatment or a Rejuvra on the soil surface, and we can get rid of the cheatgrass, you can see how that wildfire isn't able to carry through these systems. So when you look at a wildfire benefit, Rejuvra is right up there. We're able to extend noxious weed control. Try tank mixing Rejuvra with your noxious weed treatments for Dalmatian and Mullein and knapweed. We can extend that control because those species aren't able to come back via the seed bank if we're only using our post-emergent products like Telar, Milestone, Tordon. We need that longevity, and Rejuvra can provide that seed bank target. We're able to restore rangeland ecosystems, which is a huge deal. And finally, we can really increase our rangeland productivity and give ranchers the opportunity to take back their most important asset. And that most important asset is their land. And a lot of that land is being invaded by invasive annual grasses. And what we can do is selectively take out those invasive grasses and promote those perennial grasses that you can use on those sites. And this photo just shows you the release of the perennials after treatment and the massive increase in production we're seeing once we're able to treat. But in order to get all these benefits, what we got to do is make sure that we're getting a uniform application because that's so very important to longevity. We get our timing right. So for pre-emergence, we need to go out early, go out 1 to 2 months before you think that weed's going to germinate. For post-emergence, make sure we're adding something like plateau to the tank so we have a combination of pre and post. Coverage, go at the highest possible. If you're doing by air, do no less than 5 GPA, and we want that uniform application. And make sure you're calibrated. Do not under apply because we know that 5 ounces of product of Rejuvra is going to give us that longevity, and we want to make sure that we're applying 5 ounces per acre. And once that occurs, we need incorporation and activation via rainfall, which is very important to get it to the soil where it's active. And that's going to result in that long-term invasive grass control and give you the best return on the investment for putting those treatments out there. This was a quick rundown on many different topics in terms of applications, and I hope it was beneficial. Please reach out to our range and pasture specialist at any time. You can also go to rejuvra.com. There's a lot of resources on there, and feel free, like I said, to reach out to any one of us